Hi, everybody. My name is Joe Lambert. I'm the president of Joe Lambert Mastering here in Jersey City. And what we want to do today is master a song for you. You hear, listening, hearing what I hear before and after, so that you have a better idea of what this is really all about. Is it big changes? Is it small changes? And the truth is, it's different for every single song. So we're going to start with a song by a band called the Aviary. We're going to do one track. This band's in the process of doing a full-length record, which we're going to master when they finish. One of the reasons this is really helpful is the producer and the band got a sense of where this project really is at. You know, when you're an artist working on a song or a record, you have ideas of where things are going, but you're not really sure, are we in the right direction? Not just, song-wise, but just the overall balance of what you're doing. This song was really helpful to the producer because he's been treating his room over the last couple of months. He brought in a system to help equalize his room, so to speak. So that could be really tricky because what you're hearing and how that music translates somewhere else can be really different. And that's really the main thing that a mastering engineer like myself is trying to accomplish. What's the best way to get your song to translate as magically as possible anywhere, on your iPhone, in a room like this, and all the places in between. All right, well, the first thing I do is just listen to the song. A lot of people ask me, what is the process? It's just really as simple for me as I just listen to the song and I just try to react and just hear what's coming out of the speakers. Is it hitting me in a great way? Is it really muddy? Is it too bright? All these things without really thinking about it. I just kind of want to react. And sometimes there's a lot of things I have to do. And sometimes there's very few things I have to do. Knowing the one or two things to really make the song sit right can be sometimes more difficult than, really having to dig in and sculpt out a song. So let's start listening to this song. So I have heard the song before. It's a really cool song. And the one thing I noticed right off the bat, it's really well done, it's really well played, but I can hear his room. I can tell from the first 30 seconds, especially once that voice comes in, I can tell there's just way too much air pressure going on in the song, too much low end. There's a song in there, but I can tell also that in his room, it probably sounds very close to what we're going to end up with. But he's definitely overcompensating in the low end. So the first thing I'm going to do is get it to like a reasonable listening level, around 85 dB-ish, because that's where our ear really wants to hear things. That's about the most linear for the human ear as far as the ratio of bass, mid-range, top end. If you play things too loud, bass goes up, so you're not as accurate. If you don't listen loud enough, then you're not hearing enough bass. So I always listen at the same level. I know what the bass feels like in this room. I know what the top end and just the overall amount of air pressure moving in here. I know how that makes my body feel. Like that's pretty darn close. So I get it up to a decent level.
Lanterns facing up.
And like I said, the thing I'm noticing is that once I do get it, I'm looking at my meters, to getting it to, a pretty decent level, it's just not exciting enough yet. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start cleaning up some of that low end, because I could just tell it's his vocal, the actual melodies of the guitars and such are just being masked. It's kind of like when, somebody's hands over their mouth. You really don't get the details. So what I want to do is I'm going to start with my buzz. I'm just going to put a shelf on the buzz around 90 hertz and just start listening how that sounds. I'm going to go to the meat of the song just to kind of hear the average volume, the average amount of low end. I want to hear hear that voice come in.
Lift yourself away from all that's gone. And if I was in your place, but I don't know.
Now this is tricky. So I could tell that it's got too much bottom end, but his voice is also kind of on top. He's got this kind of high-ish voice, for lack of a better way to put it. My first reaction is like, okay, it's pretty tight, but now maybe he's coming out too much. So I'm gonna double check that. All right, now one thing I do is, because I have to go a little further than I thought, I'm gonna switch to this Soundtech EQ, because if I have to go more than 2 dB or 3 dB, there's just the curve on this. I just like it better for this type of thing. So I'm gonna pop that in.
Just lift yourself away from all that's gone. In your place,
Okay, I really like where the low end is sitting. Feels good. Obviously now I've got a couple dB less, 3 dB less bottom, so that affects my level. I'm going to bring the level up a little bit more, get it back to where it should be, and then I'm going to listen to the mid-range and kind of where all that's sitting now. Make sure his voice is just right. You know, put in a compressor, see if that's going to help a little bit. One thing I do all the time, especially when there's some real cleanup on a song, is I'm just going back and forth between what I'm doing and what they came in with, and always checking, because you could really, go down a rabbit hole, so to speak. So I want to know what I came in with, and then I listen back, make sure what I'm doing is actually better, making sure it's going in the right direction.
and if I was in your place, but I don't know.
Now the compression really helps on this track, so I put the Manley Very Mute compressor in. I'm not hitting it too hard, but because the song had too much bottom end, it probably felt more compressed than it really was, especially to them. Because when you have too much bottom, it gives you the sense of clutter or glue. So now that there's 3 dB less bottom end, that stuff just needs a little bit more glue. Now this is just one song. What I'm going to do to any other song could be totally different. Every mix is different. Some mixes need bottom, some need top, some needs a lot of compression. The last thing they need is compression. So everything I do is a song by song basis. There's no preset mastering decision, before I've ever heard a song. It doesn't need a lot of compression, just a touch, really. I've got, my ratio's at 2.5. Fast recovery, slow attack. I want the attack as slow as possible on this track, because I don't really need it to change the sound. I just wanted to glue it a little bit, where that magic stuff starts to happen, where I can turn it down and everything's kind of holding in place, and when I turn it up, it's not strident. All right, so now I've got the general balance of the EQ and compression in. I'll play a little before and after, just so you get an idea of where I'm at. So this is before.
And if I was in your place, but I don't know.
I'm going to pop this in. Let's give you an idea of where we're at so far. So already it's like so much more alive. The vocal sounds so much more apparent, and just you hear all the beautiful stuff that's in the mix. It's a really good mix. There's a lot of cool stuff going on. It was just a little cluttered, so I just couldn't hear all the good stuff that was in there. So now it's really close. A couple little things that I want to do probably just to make sure it's really, really as good as it can be. So I'm going to just double check the vocal EQ, some top end. I might need just a hair more top end now, just to put some sheen on it. So I'm going to go back to the buzz, and I'm going to listen to how that affects some of the things I just talked about.
Is in your place, but I don't know. The lantern's facing up, but they will go.
Okay, so what happens to me often is once I start getting a song close, is I get excited. I can hear where it is, where I want to, if it needs anything else. So my hands start moving really fast because I almost like want to catch my thoughts before they get away. And I start reacting quickly. So what I did is I noticed right away, okay, voice is a little sibilant now. So one thing that'll drive me crazy, and drives a lot of people crazy, is just too much S, too much sibilance. So I inserted the Maslick de-esser, and doesn't need a lot, 1-2 dB, just to take the edge off the voice so it's warm and inviting. The easiest way I could describe how I like a song is I like you to want to turn it up and it sounds better. And if a voice is too sibilant, too strident, and your head starts doing that pullback thing, and nobody likes that. I always want to be like, oh, it sounds so big. So I added a dB of upper mid-range to his voice, around 2.2K, just to get some of the sparkle around it. It also brought out a little bit of some of the top of the snare. This is something you have to be careful about with mastering, because it is all cause and effect. Everything I do to 500 hertz affects everything. The whole mix. So you really have to listen, without prejudice. You can really focus on, I want to bring the vocal out, or I want to bring these guitars out. And you can do that, but you just also have to remember, is it bringing something else too out front, or is it distracting from the melody? Maybe the main melody is somewhere else in the song. So always just keeping that in check. The last thing I did, EQ-wise, again, because it was a little dark, I just put a little bit of air at the top. I used the Sontec, put a little 14K in, just a couple of dB. Again, it's a magic box. I mean, I don't know anything on planet Earth that does top end like the Sontec. It's just, there's a reason there's been, generations of mastering engineers have used this thing. It just sounds so good. And again, 2 dB is plenty for this particular track. Okay, I feel comfortable with the overall balance EQ of the main meat of the song. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to start listening to it as a song again, not just a piece, because sometimes what works in the beginning of the song is not what's needed for the chorus, or not what's needed for a verse. And this song definitely has a vibe to it where it grows and then it shrinks down and then it gets big again. So now I have to listen to how it just all sits dynamically, because what I really want to do is make sure that the ebb and flow of the song is at least as good as it was when it came in, or maybe it needs to be exaggerated. Maybe the chorus needs to pop more than the verse. Maybe the verse is too bright in reference to the chorus. This song in particular starts off slow, it gets big, shrinks down a little bit, and then it's got the big ending again. So now I got to listen to it all in context. And then maybe I do a spot EQ here or there. Maybe the level's going to change. So the song starts off a little slower. There's less going on. It's very typical. So I actually didn't need as much bottom rolled off. So I actually brought up a little bit more bottom for that first intro and verse section because it's got a nice mellow vibe. Voice is sitting perfectly fine. And it allowed me to drop the level just a hair so that when it gets to that big section that I was listening to before, I want that to blossom. I want his vocal to, if anything, feel bigger. I want the band to feel like, bigger. Okay, so how do I get there? The quick answer is I try to do it in real time. I like to have as much hands-on fun, and it's almost like a performance to me. I like to lock into the song. So a lot of the times that's what I do. I'm taking notes for this section, that section, and if there's simple moves, if I've just got to notch the volume on one section or adjust the low end or high end on one section, a simple amount, I can do that. And sometimes it's just too hard. Maybe there's way too much of a change. If I have to change the low end and the compression for a chorus, say, something that happens often is you get this big chorus. So as a mix engineer, this chorus sounds amazing, and you focused on that. That's the money shot of the song, so to speak. So it sounds amazing. And then I hear the verse, and it's much brighter, much less compression, because what happens is all the toys that you have that are working while you're setting up that big chorus, the threshold drops because the band now is playing much less. There's maybe 3 less keyboards and 2 less vocals. So the song gets louder and bigger because there's just so much more space. And if anything, we kind of want the opposite effect. So I'll have to set up for that verse, get the EQ, the compression, the dynamic range, the level, and I'll run that through the gear, I capture it, then I go back to the chorus, reset everything, capture that, and then I edit them together. The one thing we didn't mention that's part of the chain is a digital limiter at the end. What I have on this particular track is, as you can see over here, it's a DMG Audio limitless limiter. It's a great limiter. I've been using it for a little while and I really like it. So one of the questions is, how do I set the limiter? How do I make the decision of what is the actual ultimate level of this track? And there's many different things that go into making a record loud. One of the reasons loud records sound loud is because they're EQ'd properly. I mean, that's really the most important thing, is getting it to sound right. But then once we get that, I take it to where I can hear it. It sounds great. If I start hearing the limiter, I know where I want to stop. I can just tell, are the cymbals getting hashy, or is there a certain amount of crushing that I could just hear that I don't necessarily like. So that's where I try to keep things, is before that happens. But like I said, it's not my record, and my job is to make everyone happy. So if they come to me and say, we love it, but we want it to be 2 dB louder, I tell them, okay, here's what's going to happen, and I'll make it 2 dB louder. You now have the choice. Do you like it? Sometimes they do, and they go, yeah, that's great. We couldn't be happier. And sometimes like, it sounded better before. I'm like, yeah, sometimes it does sound better. It's a moving target. It's not new to making records. Ever since there was a vinyl cutting lathe, people have been trying to figure out the best way to make their record louder, to make their record heard above somebody else. And as an advocate for what I like to consider just wonderful sounding music, that's what I grew up on. I just love great sounding records, whatever the style is. I feel the same way today as I did, I was 12 years old when I get a new record and I just put it on, and it just moves me in a way that really nothing else in my life does. So I am an advocate to try to help people maintain a certain common sense about, where their record could be. Often people ask me about stereo width. for the last 10 years, it's just become a really popular thing. How do I get my record wider? What's the magic thing that happens for you to be able to get these records so wide? And there are some tools that I have. I've got some really cool tools in my Masterclass console. There's a stereo width control, which really sounds wonderful. It's 100% mono compatible. I could just sit here and jack up the amount of sides of the stereo, or I can take that out. And it's all happening in real time. I can hear it. The artist can sometimes sit here and they can just play with the knob themselves and just say, yeah, that sounds great. But truth be told, I use it a lot less than people think. Again, the reason a lot of records sound wide is just having the right amount of balance. For example, if you've got a lot of low end on your track that's just murking up the mid-range, it's not going to sound wide. It just sounds dull. So once you get that stuff cleaned up, or it could be a song that just didn't have enough low end, it's all mid-range. So then you get that big low end going, you got the kick, you're getting that depth of field. It just sounds wider. And that is as important as any, knob, so to speak. I want to let you know what my signal chain was for this song. My signal chain can change on every single song. So for this particular track, it came in as a digital file. So I have my Pro Tools over here. And basically, I've got all sorts of plugins. I can do all sorts of fancy things if I want to, but I honestly don't use them that much. On this particular track, I'm just taking the digital output of my Pro Tools, and that's hitting my Aviary D to A converter. I got a lot of fancy analog gear, and especially with this type of song that it was, I just wanted to run it through some really high-end analog gear. So I came out, first thing I hit was the Sontec, cleaned it up a little bit. Then it hits the buzz, add a little EQ there. Then I went into the Manley compressor after I've got my EQ pretty much the way I want. A little bit of tube compression there. Oh, also I had the Meslick de-esser in. So yeah, I have the de-esser at the end of the analog chain. Then the output of my analog desk goes to my Aviary A to D. There's some common sense. You can hit these pretty hard, but you gotta listen. Am I hearing distortion? Get that level where it's humming, but not, nothing negative coming out of it. Then I go into my Soundblade workstation. It hits the Limitless to add a couple extra dB. And then I just record it directly into my Soundblade. Now again, I have all sorts of plugins there. If there was something that I felt needed just a really fine-tuned de-esser on a specific couple words, I could go in and do that there if I needed to. Obviously, I could do level rides if I needed to. On this particular song, once it came out of the limiter into Soundblade, I was basically done. The only thing I'm using the digital editor for is just to head and tail the song, check the fade. Everything else I did basically with my hands in the analog domain. But I try to keep it as fun as I can, and I really do try to make as many moves as I can in the analog world. And then that's basically it. I've got my high-res file in Soundblade, and it's basically done. I'm glad I got a chance to do this, and I hope this is really helpful to people. We're in a day and age now that the music industry is so fractured, as far as we've got people making records in their garage, we've got people who are on record labels, people who are on big labels, small labels, all kinds of music, all kinds of media that is bombarding us every day. So to get your art heard is a really difficult thing to do, even if you're already famous. And a lot of people don't have the ability to have someone hold their hand, so to speak, like the bands that we grew up on, and walk them through the process of making a great record. I love the opportunity to help people get the best out of their music. There's so many variables now that you're up against trying to get your song done, to get your song heard. And at the very least, it's just got to sound, quote unquote, finished. It's got to be mastered so that people will, at the very least, take you serious. Before you could go to a record label with a demo and they could hear, like, we hear where we can take this. Now you have to, for the most part, walk into a record label with your record done. And then they can say, yeah, we can promote this. Mastering every track is a journey. Thanks for coming along on this one. And it's a really easy way to get your record from sounding okay to sounding magical, in the right hands.